In the mid to long term, United aren't going to get back into the Champions League, let alone win the Premier League, if we don't have an elite level tactician as a head coach who can adapt and evolve his tactical systems with how the game is changing. I don't know who made up the notion that coaches have an inherent right to just come in and play the exact same system down to every fine detail that they played in prior leagues with a different club, different set of players, and most importantly against a different level of competition, because it's just nonsense. Every coach from Guardiola to De Zerbi to Amorim has to evolve their tactical system every other year, maybe even every year, depending on how the tactical landscape changes, otherwise you just get left behind. Just think back to Sir Alex Ferguson. He evolved from the early 2000s to the late 2000s, switching from a structured and more direct 4-4-2 shape to a far more fluid 4-3-3 system that had a lot more control, whilst Guardiola has been constantly evolving throughout his career, revolutionising the game at Bayern Munich with his use of inverted fullbacks, having already had unparalleled success in his prior spell at Barcelona. You have to be able to identify how the game is changing tactically and make the appropriate tactical adjustments. You have to work out what other coaches are doing in order to nullify and exploit systems that have been dominant in previous years, and how you can then adapt your system in order to exploit the new weaknesses that their tactical change has created. But before I break down exactly how I think Amorim should go about doing this, if you do want to pick up any cheap and good quality football jerseys, go over to dragonjersey.com. They've got a variety of different current season and retro jerseys, with Manchester United jerseys going all the way back to the early 90s. For a limited time, you can also use code Atlantis at checkout for a 10% discount, and depending on where you live, you can get 7 to 12 days delivery time, as well as a 30-day refund guaranteed. If you do want to get in contact and check any of the details, they do have their WhatsApp and their email on the site. So if you do want to check out any of the jerseys, I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comment section below. And remember to use code Atlantis at checkout for your 10% discount. So around 2022-2023, De Zerbi's automated patterns of play from build-up, where there was a far greater intention with playing through the centre, revolutionised how coaches thought about their possession strategy. And so the majority of top-level coaches, from Arteta to Pep to Nagelsmann, and even Ruben Amorim himself, started to focus more on instructing their deeper players to thread passes through the centre of the pitch, reducing the spaces between their players in order to make these shorter passing sequences a lot more viable, whilst also being more patient and sometimes even looking to entice a press in order to then play through and take advantage of the space in behind that press has created. However, a few years on from De Zerbi's initial tactical renaissance, and opposition sides have worked out that most teams, particularly the elite teams, have become so obsessed with playing patient and methodical football through the centre of the pitch. The optimal way of defending is just to resist the pressing traps laid out, and instead be more conservative with their defensive shape, sitting deeper and more compact, closing off the passing lane centrally, and being more comfortable forcing sides out wide. Wherefrom, because a lot of coaches, with Postecoglou and Maresca being two examples, not having wide patterns of play as good as their central ones, it's become harder for top level Premier League sides to play through deep defensive blocks. And this is certainly something that has been a key theme that we've seen with Amorim's United, as United have struggled most against the lesser Premier League sides because their deep and compact defensive shapes make it incredibly hard to create by playing through the centre of the middle and the final third. And so I think Amorim and other coaches like Maresca, Postecoglou, Arteta and Pep all have to evolve, but how do they evolve tactically? Well, as I said in a previous video, I think the meta is shifting away from the Cruyffian influenced positional play that under the all-conquering Guardiola has not just dominated but also influenced the tactical side of the game to an almost unprecedented level over the past decade and a half. But the positional play coaches like Pep, Amorim and Arteta need to start using more direct play in order to take advantage of how opposition sides have adapted to combat them, and that comes from having physicality, aerial ability and pace in the forward line and knowing how to use them effectively. And in my opinion, the key is having these physically, athletically and aerially dominant centre forwards, reminiscent of the late 90s to early mid 2000s, where strikers like Shevchenko, Adriano, Vieira, Batistuta, Torres and Drogba were the norm at the top level. Taking the build-up phase for example, if the opposition look to press you aggressively man to man, they have to also go man for man at the back as well. And so having players in the forward line who can win these 1v1 duels simply from playing a direct pass into them and have them almost single-handedly drive the ball up the pitch into a chance creating or a goal scoring position is a massive advantage compared to having more nimble and technically astute forwards who are obviously going to be more reliant on their teammates in order to aid them progressing the ball forward with coordinated coordinated passing sequences and movements, and this is why in my video on why Manchester United should go all out and spend the majority of their transfer budget on the forward line, targeting players like Gyökeres and Osimhen, I talk specifically about the impact during the build-up phase, as this is where coaches can automate patterns of play most effectively, because the ball is dead, coming back into play usually from a goal kick, and so setting up your side and then being able to manipulate the opposition pressing shape, who are most likely going to be man-to-man pressing, is a lot easier than trying to use similar coordinated patterns of play in the middle third, because when a team drops off deeper, they often revert away from a man-to-man press, and use more of a zonal defensive shape, where instead of following a designated player as they do further up the pitch, they're instead marking an area, not being moved out by an opposition player's movement. And so this is why it's so hard to play through the centre of the pitch in the middle third, compared with the build-up phase. Sides now sit very narrow and also squeeze their backline higher up the pitch in order to condense the space between the lines even further. And so even Manchester City, with highly technical players such as De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva and Foden, are struggling to break down these defensive setups, because the space that they're going to be receiving the ball in is so small that unless every single pass in the sequence is bang on in terms of the weight, timing and direction, the opposition players are close enough in terms of proximity to be able to shift across and break up the play. And so how could Amorim evolve his system to exploit the weaknesses that these teams have created by adapting their defensive shapes? Well, the answer for me is direct passes from build-up and crosses in the final third. The issue for Amorim is that the squad is not designed for this. There's no point playing these direct balls to Højlund because you're giving the ball away 9 out of 10 times unless he can draw a foul, and link play with Xerxes has to come through passes into his feet. In the final third, neither Xerxes or Højlund are anywhere near prolific enough aerially to cause the opposition centre-back significant problems, and apart from when Bruno Fernandes picks up the ball in one of those narrow half-space areas and floats in a subtle curling cross, we don't really have anyone who specialises in these crossing situations, certainly no one from deeper areas on the flanks. And so whilst Amorim should be looking to incorporate more crosses and direct passes into his possession strategy, United also need to build a squad that is compatible with these patterns of play. And that's why I'm so adamant that United should focus their efforts on securing one, if not two centre forwards who are complete in all these areas. And apart from Osimhen and Gyökeres, there aren't too many forwards around who are quick, physical, competent when linking play from direct balls, aerial threats inside of the box, and all-round clinical finishers. Benjamin Sesko maybe, but at this stage in his development he isn't as complete or as clinical as the other two, and he'd probably cost more than both at around £65 to £70 million. Alongside that, United need a crossing specialist. I'm surprised other teams haven't thought of this, because just think about Trent Alexander-Arnold at Liverpool over the past half decade. Now before I break down exactly why, a quick reminder, I do have a Patreon. If you do like unusual topics or outside of the box ideas, then you'll probably like my articles. I'll put some free ones up as well, but you can also get a 7-day free trial where you can read my articles, and you can also sign up for the in-game Instagram group chat as well if you do want, and you will get an ebook for free when I do eventually release it. So if you do want to sign up, it would be very much appreciated. I'll leave it linked in the eye above, description and comment section below, and on the end screen after the video. So whereas with a Savinho or a Doku out wide, you need to work a situation where they can isolate a fullback in a 1v1, you are still reliant on them being able to beat their man to get into a crossing position, which even if done successfully can be easily closed off after they've actually beaten their man, because it's going to be so congested on that side around the box. However, with someone like Trent, you can just switch the play out to him quickly in space, and with 1 or 2 touches, he can get the ball out of his feet and create a high value chance with his crossing, without even needing to beat his man. And this is why David Beckham was so underrated. He could create a chance without having to dribble past a player. And so by drawing the opposition defensive shape over to one side in the middle third, and then using a long pass to switch play out to the specialist deep crosser on the other side, with genuine aerial threats in the centre, you now have a method of creating high value chances that is incredibly hard for the opposition to stop consistently throughout a game. And this is why I like the idea of signing Dwight McNeil, because you can use him either as a left or a right wing back, and maybe even centrally as well, having him pull out wide to get into these crossing positions, where from with Gyökeres and Osimhen centrally, even with the same midfield and back line that we currently have, our ability to create high value chances has dramatically increased, because McNeil doesn't have to beat anyone out wide in order to deliver an inch perfect cross from deep. And even the most aerially dominant centre-back pairings in the league, Saliba and Gabriel, or even Konate and Van Dijk, aren't going to want to constantly have to deal with McNeil's crossing and Osimhen and Gyökeres in the centre. I just think it's a completely overpowered combination, and in total it's not even as expensive as most people make out, as you consider that Gyökeres and Osimhen combined would probably be 120 to 130 million pounds. Obviously the wages would be big, but we are getting players like Casemiro, Rashford, Lindelof, Eriksen, etc. off of the wage bill, which alongside McNeil for another 30 to 35 million pounds, with the likes of Rashford and Sancho already being sold, probably also Antony, with Højlund, Garnacho and Xerxes all players who United could also sell to raise money for reinvestment. I actually think it works out pretty well financially. 150 to 160 million pounds on 3 players in their mid-20s who all specialise in the specific areas that United need would be an excellent way for United to spend the majority of their transfer budget this summer, even if it does mean signing stopgap players on loan, free transfers, or for minimal fees in order to fill out the other positions in the squad. So let me know if you agree with my overall hypothesis on how the game is changing, as well as some other players that we could maybe sign who are crossing specialist or aerially dominant in order to allow Amorim to make a successful adaptation. You can check out the jerseys, I'll leave them linked in the description and comment section below, and my Patreon will be on the end screen now as well.